you. Okay, we'll move to a presentation and discussion on preliminary design of the Pollutant Reduction Plan, or PRP, project options for Ferguson Township, and this will be introduced by Aaron Jolin.
While Aaron's getting set up, I'll just note that Aaron Jolin, our stormwater engineer, as well as Shannon Lucas with KCI, our consultant, will give you a presentation on our design so far of our pollutant reduction plan projects that are a requirement of our MS4 permit. And somewhere along the line, they'll touch a little bit on the duck pond project that you may have heard a little bit in the past, and there's a number of attachments in your packet. And so if at that, I'll turn it over to Aaron.
Thank you. All right, good evening. For the record, my name is Aaron Jolin. I'm the Ferguson Township stormwater engineer. Also with us virtually is Shannon Lucas. She's with KCI Technologies Incorporated, who led the design team completing the concept and preliminary design scope for the PRP projects in the township as authorized by the board in June this year. We are excited to be here to present this information, and a lot of effort and collaboration has taken place to get to this stage. Presentation builds on the board work session completed in January earlier this year. There'll be a lot of information presented. I'll apologize in advance for that. Some of it's technical, some representing new developments, but I think it's good that you guys understand it and understand how much work went into this. And then ultimately, staff hopes the presentation will provide the necessary information for the board to provide direction on how to proceed with fulfilling the PRP goals. Quick note, some additional information was received from PSU today, and there are a few minor modifications to the slides that we updated in accordance with the information we received. So in the board packet, some of that has been updated based on what we got today. To provide a brief overview, I will provide a brief background presentation on MS4, the PRP subject matter, as a refresher for the new board members, for the audience, and for anybody who hasn't heard it before. And then I will turn it over to KCI, our consultant, and they will share the design progression and present additional findings, some other information that we learned while we were out there. I'll present additional updates on the duck pond, as well as review updated cost estimates. And then finally, we'll open it up to the floor for discussion, questions, or anything else. And ultimately, again, we hope that we can get some direction from the board on how to proceed. To briefly review the background, Ferguson Township has an NPDES MS4 Phase 2 permit. NPDES stands for National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, and MS4 stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. This applies to the urban area in the township. The state-issued MS4 permit provides the guidelines and requirements for the township stormwater management program. I'll note that Ferguson Township stormwater management program is available on the township website. I did provide a link in the board packet. I'll also mention that the township staff conducts a separate annual public review of the stormwater management program at a board of supervisors meeting every spring to review all the MS4 requirements and how the township operates to meet those requirements. Continuing on, some of the MS4 responsibilities are conducted jointly with our MS4 partners. This helps to manage some of the pieces in the workload, mostly public education and participation requirements. So we have good working relationships with the partners. Our permit is good for 5 years. Our current permit cycle began July 1st, 2020 and expires June 30th, 2025. And all requirements for this permit cycle, including the PRP, which we'll discuss today, must be met by that June 25 date to stay in compliance. Staff is required to submit an annual report each fall, reporting on our progress. And then lastly, as Ferguson Township moved into the Phase 2 permit, this last permit cycle, we added this PRP, or Pollution Reduction Plan requirement. Oops, daisy. That is why we're here tonight. The Pollution Reduction Plan, some of the highlights. The plan was developed in collaboration with the partners. The plan was started in 2018, finally approved in 2020 as part of our MS4 permit renewal. And again, there's a link in the board packet for the full PRP. It's a pretty interesting read if you're like me, but you don't have to. It just provides additional information so you guys know where to find it. The objective of the PRP is to produce tangible improvements to the quality of stormwater discharges in impaired local waterways in the Chesapeake Bay, and improvement of stormwater quality is completed via implementation of pollution control measures, or PCMs, in locations that are impacted by urban runoff. So PCMs may include stormwater facility retrofits, buffers, stream restoration, street sweeping. There's a number of things that we can do to help reduce our pollutant loading. And then part of the PRP plan components consist of describing the planning areas, including the land uses, locations of existing stormwater facilities, and evaluating the pollutant loadings. So for this permit cycle, the pollution control measures are required to be implemented to achieve a 10% reduction in sediment loading. By reducing sediment, we reduce nitrogen, phosphorus, and meet the goals of what we're trying to do to improve water quality to the bay. I guess all PRPs approved of this PCM that we decide to do, we have to complete the design, obtain the easements and right-of-way, complete permit and construction, all by 2025. There's a lot of information on this map, so hopefully you had a chance to review it beforehand, but I'll go over it briefly. The solid colored areas show the MS4 Partners planning area for this permit cycle. Ferguson Township has a small, Ferguson Township is shown in orange, first off, and we have a small amount of urban area that drains to the Beaver Branch of the Juniata watershed, and then the remainder of the township urban area drains to Spring Creek via, which is in the West Branch of the Susquehanna, and it drains via the Big Hollow and Slab Cabin. The majority of our urban area drains to Big Hollow, with the second most to Slab Cabin, then the small amount to Beaver Branch. Ferguson Township's PRP PCMs are shown on the map, with projects names shown in the upper left. Projects beginning with an A are the primary projects that were put forth in the PRP. Projects shown with a B are the secondary projects. And while the plan in January had been to kind of review which projects, including both primary and secondary, were going to be the best to do, we have only focused on the primary projects. That's mostly a result of staff changes, workload shifting, and bringing a consultant on board to help with the design. So projects we'll be focused on in today are A2 on Beaver Branch, A4 on Slab Cabin, and A3, which is east of the State College Borough and PSU, called the Duck Pond. These are the pollution loadings calculated and required for reduction for this permit cycle. We were required to reduce the total pollutant load by 59,525 pounds per year. One thing of interest on this slide, you'll notice that our loading and subsequent reduction requirements for Spring Creek via Big Hollow are extremely low as compared with the amount of urban land that drains to Big Hollow. As I reviewed on the other slide, most of our area drains to Big Hollow, but because the majority of the stormwater runoff doesn't reach Spring Creek, our actual pollution loading reduction is very low because no surface water gets there. So that's all a result of local karst topography and sinkholes. The only time we really see any kind of runoff is in an event that's 3 inches or more, or we have a frozen ground condition or other type of event that causes causes runoff to actually get to Spring Creek. So I point this out because I want to, we have it good compared to some municipalities who have all this urban area. They do not have to, they don't get that break of having water drain into the ground. It certainly doesn't mean we shouldn't be protecting it, but I think, we don't have quite the pollution load reduction as required by a lot of other municipalities that do not have karst. So that was, I thought that would be good for you guys to all understand. Just a little bit more detail. This slide presents the location of our primary projects in the PRP. Project A2 on Beaver Branch in the Juniata watershed proposes 350 linear feet of restoration in Piney Ridge, below Wyoming Ave. Project A4 on Slab Cabin, Spring Creek, proposed 295 linear feet, of restoration below East Chestnut with an alternative A4 alt is what we're calling it, for completing restoration of the whole stretch between East Chestnut and Butternut Street. The approved PRP also allowed for Ferguson Township to receive a 17.5% credit for the restoration work, approximately 175 linear feet of A3, the duck pond. Just this November, in mid-November, PSU gave us a letter, which is included with the board packet, extending additional credit up to 506 linear feet. And we'll talk more about that new opportunity in a little bit later. Oops, sorry. Getting ahead of myself. So I put this slide together. This kind of summarizes what the options will be as we move forward, and something you may want to keep in mind as we go through this presentation. I will follow this slide up later in the presentation with costs for you guys to look at. And all of the options that we have to do to meet our goals, we have to complete primary project A2 in Piney Ridge below Wyoming Ave. There is no alternate for that. It's in a different watershed, so we have to complete that project. There are options for how we can complete our goals with Slab Cabin, Big Hollow in the Spring Creek watershed. In no significant order, option 1 would require us to complete a portion of A3 Duck Pond and A4 below East Chestnut in the amount of 295 linear feet. Option 2 would require the township to complete A4 alt only from East Chestnut to Butternut. And then option 3 would require additional participation in the Duck Pond project by purchasing additional credit from PSU, what we'll call A3 alt. We'll come back to the slide with the cost later, but first I'd like to introduce Shannon Lucas from KCI Technologies to provide a review of the updated design details for the township projects, which are A2, A4, and A4 alt, as well as some additional findings. KCI has a highly experienced team, was chosen as the consultant to complete this work, including the environmental assessments, concept, and preliminary designs for both PRP projects. Shannon is a senior project manager in the natural resources practice at KCI, where she oversees all aspects of the assessment, the design, construction, implementation for almost all their stream restoration projects. I want to extend my sincerest thanks to KCI for the role they played to develop this to this point. We did this all in a very short amount of time, and they have been very professional and collaborative to work with. So with that, Shannon.
Thank you very much, Aaron. And for the record, I'm Shannon Lucas with KCI Technologies. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Aaron, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you too, yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
All right, I'll go ahead and. So in July, KCI started with our assessment and design. We performed existing condition assessment, including agency coordination to identify rare, threatened, and endangered species. Both projects are in the vicinity of northern long-eared bat habitat, which does restrict tree removal between May 15th and August 15th. We did wetland delineations. And neither Beaver Branch nor Slab Cabin has wetlands beyond the channels themselves. We performed baseline invasive species documentation. Both sites have Norway maple, Amur honeysuckle, multiflora rose, Japanese knotweed, among other invasives. And we performed geomorphic survey. So we surveyed cross sections, longitudinal profile, bed material measurements, bank erosion potential, and lastly, we performed storm drain and culvert assessments. Our restoration design objectives include reducing sediment and nutrient loads by arresting the erosion to improve water quality. This is to fulfill your MS4 permit requirements that Aaron's been alluding to. Address resilience benefits, including establishing a self-maintaining stream system, maximizing floodplain connection, maintaining or reducing the 100-year water surface elevations, improving storm infrastructure, and establishing native planting to improve habitat, stability, and biodiversity. We also are looking to address residents' concerns, including flooding and property loss. And we are looking to minimize the cost by reducing easement requirements as well as needs for a lot of imported rock. KCI applies a natural design approach to mimic natural stable streams by applying and will apply scaled dimensions and relationships from a stable reference reach, for example, the pool-to-pool spacing or the radius of curvature, those types of things, and we'll apply that to our impaired reach that we're looking to restore. We look to provide bed diversity by introducing riffles and pools. We use native materials, including rock and native vegetation. One of the most valuable elements of stream restoration is floodplain connection. In other words, giving the water a place to spread out. This can reduce the power and velocities that erode the channel bed and banks. It can also reduce nutrients, attenuate flows to reduce downstream flooding, improve drought resilience, and create floodplain wetlands. We validate our designs, sizing rock and specifying materials to ensure long-term stability over a range of flows up to the 100-year storm event. The result is a reduced maintenance cost as compared to other alternatives, including stormwater facilities. So I'll start with Beaver Branch, the A2 project. According to USGS Stream Stats, the channel receives runoff from about 160 acres, of which 77% are forested, 17% is urban cover, and 3% is impervious surfaces. Beaver Branch is an intermittent spring-fed headwater stream that flows through a riparian buffer of maintained lawn and agricultural fields with scattered trees. The channel's relatively flat, it's about 1%. In 2017, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service completed a stream restoration project that begins at the downstream end of our reach here. Since the restoration was implemented, there has been some incision and downcutting in that reach, and you can see the purple arrows here indicate where there is a cross vein that is successfully holding the grade upstream of that incision. Thank you, Erin. Okay. During runoff events, adjacent residents have experienced flooding, and you can see these low-lying areas looking upstream that the blue arrows and Erin are pointing to. The channel is entrenched with little area for flood flows to spread out. The channel bed is dominated by silty material. There's active bed and bank erosion, and there are also overhead lines spanning Wyoming Avenue. So now I'll talk about our proposed concept design, and I'll give a shout out to my colleague Wisa, who did these renderings, and you should have those there with you tonight as well for your reference. The proposed restoration begins at the Wyoming Avenue culvert, where we'll introduce a rock plunge pool to help dissipate the energies from the confined flows discharging from that culvert. From there, we'll begin at the existing bed elevation. In other words, we're not planning to raise the channel at all. We're going to start at the existing invert and then gradually lower the channel and tie in downstream of where that cross vein is now to the existing bed elevation within the previously restored reach. We will, the berms are graded down to allow for positive drainage to the channel and prevent flooding in the yards. The channel will be positioned to maximize use of the existing easements that we have out there. We are also proposing an edge treatment, for example, this rock edge treatment depicted here. And the edge treatment aims to delineate the residential yards from the township maintained easement. We'll introduce some meanders and pools into the design and have gravel riffles as well as rock toe treatments around the bends and some grade control structures to make sure this system is stable over time. The section view shows a proposed staged channel sized to convey a 100-year storm event. There's a 6-foot wide bench that's graded in, which allows for increased floodplain connection, as well as can serve as a maintenance access road if needed. Now to flip over to the slab cabin side. The slab cabin is, again, based on the USGS stream stats, has a drainage area of approximately 1.28 square miles, or 819 acres, of which 97% is forested. There are very flashy flows with significant debris and bed load supply, which you can see in this photo here. It's classified by the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat as a Class A wild trout water and high quality stream. The DEP has requested that we do a reference reach evaluation for this channel and design to match what occurs naturally. They also requested that the channel bed disturbance be minimized. Other permitting agency concerns and requests are included on the next slide for your reference. Due to time, I am not going to go through all of these, but you can see there's been a lot of coordination to date. Okay, first I'm going to talk about the reference reach evaluation that we did. The reference reach is located just upstream of the impaired reach, so just upstream of East Chestnut. It's a stable, moderately steeped slope channel, 2 to 7% slopes. The bed material is cobble and boulders. It's moderately entrenched and has low sinuosity, meaning that it's relatively straight. It has step pools, cascades, and pocket water pools, and all of these play an important role in dissipating energy and providing refuge for fish in fast-moving waters. Now we'll flip over to the other side of East Chestnut into the impaired reach. And you can see here that there is scour at the exit of the culvert. There is property loss due to active bank erosion. And if you look at the plan view, there's red lines that indicate where there is excessive active bank erosion occurring now. There's also anti-skid deposition from runoff coming from Water Street that is clogging the storm drain outfall, which is shown here as well. So as we mentioned before, there is the original A4 reach, which is from East Chestnut 295 feet downstream. The A4 alt extends an additional length to the Butternut Street culvert. And in this area, the channel is more narrow, more confined, less flood-prone area. The riparian corridor is denuded, so it lacks a lot of vegetation and trees. There's also overhead and underground wires and utilities. Now I'm going to talk about the proposed concept design that we've developed. So for that first upstream of 295 linear feet, the proposed design starts with a rock step pool at the culvert that would raise the bed of the channel up to the existing culvert invert, and that'll allow for fish passage, which was important to DEP as well. Then we're going to use a step pools that mimic the reference reach conditions we measured upstream to realign the channel. So we're shifting the channel away from the house, and that does a couple things. It protects the private property. It also increases that floodplain connection that I had talked about earlier and allows us to reduce the amount of rock walls that were originally estimated to be needed out here, so the cost comes down as well. Similar to Beaver Branch, we're talking about doing edge treatments to delineate the easement, the township maintained easement from the private properties. Per DEP request, we are also minimizing disturbance to the channel bed. So the area circled in blue, we're planning to not touch the channel at all. We might do some invasive treatment in there, and adjacent to the channel, we're going to excavate flood-prone benches, again, allowing the water to spread out while also not impacting the stream bed. We'll be leaving mature trees where possible as well. And for the storm drain outfall that was clogged, we propose to have a snout insert to provide water quality. Here is a section rendering, and you can see the existing and proposed channels here. So you can see the existing channel that is pretty close to the house there, and our proposed channel, which moves it to the right. You can see edge treatments, step pools, and much less steep side slopes. So again, moving downstream to the expanded A4 alt scenario. And here we are looking to, again, minimize the disturbance to the channel bed by strategically placing structures. So we're not doing in-stream work continuously. We are putting spot treatments in to make sure that we are providing enough grade control and structural stability so that it's stable over the long term, while also meeting the DEP's request to not disturb more than we have to. We've done preliminary evaluations of the 100-year water surface elevations, as well as rock sizing and scour. And overall, the realignment, the bank grading, the analysis we've done have allowed us to reduce the need for expansive and expensive retaining walls. Native vegetation is aesthetically pleasing for residents and is a key component to all of our stream restoration projects. It provides shade, habitat, biodiversity, and soil stability. So both of these projects that I've been talking about would have a robust native planting with trees, shrubs, and native seed mixes. Again, you should have the exhibits there with you tonight to look at more closely. Okay, while not part of the PRP, KCI did evaluate the storm drain structures, including the Butternut Street culvert, which is at the end of the reach I was just talking about. And we found that the condition is severely corroded. The township staff believes this should be designed and permitted to allow for replacement within the next 5 years. And downstream of this culvert, the channel does have a significant vertical drop in the stream bed, so that our proposed condition involves replacing, I'll let Aaron catch up here.
That was my mistake, sorry.
There
Here we
you go.
are.
Yeah, so there are holes in the culvert now, and the flow is actually about getting around the culvert. We would replace it with a depressed concrete box culvert shown here, and then downstream of that, again, use step pools that mimic our reference reach conditions to help mitigate that steep vertical drop in the channel and make sure we have a stable conveyance downstream.
Shannon, thanks so much. All right, so now we're going to jump to talking a little bit more about the PSU duck pond. Maybe you had a chance to look at the letter in the board packet, but again, PSU provided a letter offering additional credit in the amount of 506 linear feet. Buying costs are $4.95 per pound per year, which is equivalent to $569.25 a linear foot. Routine maintenance would be covered by PSU. We received that in an email a few days ago. Restoration maintenance would be required proportional to the buy-in. And at this point, we could purchase enough from PSU. 431 linear feet would be the requirement to meet our Spring Creek, both slab cabin and Big Hollow goals. So restoration maintenance on this, if it were to fail, would be proportionally financed by the cost-sharing partner equivalent to each partner's buy-in. And a cost-sharing agreement would be required with Penn State, as you may have seen in the memo. Cost-sharing would require lump sum payments at the time of work that the work is completed, and that's a change from what we were given before. So there would be no, as we understand it, no annual fund that they would have to contribute to. It would be a one-time replacement to be determined at the time of work to be completed. As stated, the agreement, draft agreement won't be provided until after the board makes a commitment to that this is the best way to move forward. So we would be a little bit in the dark on that agreement until you provide a letter that states that. There are currently no problems that need to be addressed due to storm damage. Penn State stormwater engineer has extended the offer to the board to visit the site if you'd like to. If the board is obliged, I'll be happy to coordinate through the manager for setting something up with you. So some pros and cons. There are several pros and cons with partnering with PSU that I'd like to put out there. To begin with some of the pros, the upfront purchase cost of credits is comparably less than the cost of credits estimated for the projects in the township. We'll go into that in more detail. The routine maintenance would be covered by Penn State, and that's certainly going to result in a reduction of staff and township maintenance and time. Depending on the amount of credit purchase, the township could complete our goals for slab cabin and Big Hollow. And then we could focus on the design and final construction of Beaver Branch only. There are also several potential cons. The gabion baskets are made of metal. It will break down over time, and it will need to be replaced at some point. Unlike our designs, which are self-sustaining and expected to, once we do that restoration work, we don't anticipate having to go in there and perform maintenance. Doesn't mean it won't happen, but the goal is for a self-sustaining stream design. The design of the gabions is probably somewhere in the 10 to 75 year. It's really difficult to predict. It's also dependent on the weather and the conditions that they're subject to. So another con might be that we are not addressing known problems in the township. The impairments to the downstream are a different reach of slab cabin. Those will remain. We'll still have some of these similar problems that would, become private matters, I guess. And then, whether you decide to do Butternut Street Culvert as part of design and permitting with this, advancing those projects would certainly advise us on, give us more information to complete the Butternut Street Culvert later. So there's a lot of unknown with future costs. This project was completed prior to the wild inflation that we've seen here in the past few years, particularly with engineering projects like this. I did some very brief calculations. I'm estimating that the construction for the duck pond would be estimated more like $800,000 today. And that if you looked at this based on a 50-year life cycle with a 2 to 3%, a couple scenarios, 2 to 3% inflationary rate, and at 43.1% buy-in, the township could be on the hook for a future payment of anywhere from $950,000 to $1.5 million based on those replacement costs. That doesn't include any engineering or permitting or anything like that. Again, these are hard to predict. It's hard to predict the weather. So that's a 50-year lifespan. I just gave you one example, so you have that to understand, what this could entail in the future. So here's the fun part, getting into the costs. So this slide provides updates on all the primary projects for the benefit of the board. Information previously presented at the board work session is shown in black, and updates and new information are shown in red. One trend you will notice with the updated costs is that the total costs are anticipated to be, apologies. The total costs are anticipated to be lower than the, I'll get it right here, sorry everybody. Than what the costs were presented, the low end costs were presented at the work session. So the reductions are due mainly to the change in approach done by KCI. We did take this seriously, and we really tried to keep, get those costs down as low as we could. I think they did a great job of working through the design, looking at all kinds of different ways to do this, and really coordinating very well with us. So that was, whatever you decide, we did try to meet those goals per the work session. Construction costs on A2 for Beaver Branch are estimated about $515 per linear foot, with an additional $120,000 required for right-of-way acquisition, final design, and permitting, which is a total estimated linear foot completion cost of about $702 per linear foot, or $250,000. Costs for construction of the A3, the duck pond, were $569 and 25 cents per linear foot. So your costs there are flat whether you do A3, which is 131 linear foot, or A3 alt, which is 431 linear foot. Costs would be $77,500 or about $246,000 respectively. Construction costs for A4, which is the smaller portion, the 295 linear feet, this is the really complicated part of the restoration. So the costs per linear foot are extremely high. Construction costs are around $1,806 per linear foot, with additional $220,000 required for right-of-way acquisition, final design, and permitting, for an estimated completion cost of about $2,550 per linear foot, or about $752,000. So your cost per linear foot there are substantially higher, but when you look at Alt A4, because the downstream work is not quite as extensive, the construction costs for Alt A4 are estimated to be $710,000 or about $1,368 per linear foot, with an additional $290,000 for right-of-way acquisition, final design, and permitting, which is a total estimated completion cost of about $1,928 per linear foot, or $1,001,000. Again, probably not as low as you would like to see, but certainly below the original estimates once we push through this design. Projects A2 and the Beaver Branch and Alt A4. Any additional credit. So these projects, the way they're strategies, you can't just stop a stream restoration in the middle per the linear footage that you need to do. So both Alt A4 as well as the Beaver Branch project have some additional credits. We're doing a little bit more than we need to. While no details on pollution reduction credit requirements or banking have, for the next PRP cycle, have been provided by DEP yet, we would anticipate that we could get pretty large credit on Beaver Branch, 271 linear foot credit, and on A2 on Beaver, on Slab Cabin, Alt A4 on Slab Cabin, we would get about 88 linear feet of credit. So to the good for the next permit cycle. Real quick before we go into the final slide, so ultimately we hope that you can provide some input and feedback on what direction you'd like to go. Would you like to participate in the duck pond? If so, how much? If the board buys into the duck pond for the total amount of credit, we are only concerned with Beaver Branch at this point. Schedule for final design is pretty tight. We have to get this done by June 2025. So after tonight, staff would direct KCI to incorporate any board comments into these final preliminary designs so that they basically have a good scope to develop and put forth costs for the final design. And staff will notify KCI of the township's intentions, hopefully, relatively soon, by the end of December. In early January, we will obtain proposals from KCI. And then KCI we would authorize them to proceed in late January, hopefully, so that they can begin the final design, permitting, and construction drawings. And again, we have to do Beaver Branch, but if we decided to do the projects on Slab Cabin, we would do both at the same time. I will, after decisions are made, I will update. I've been in coordination with many of the residents because we've been out there so often. So we would update residents. By March, consultants need to provide the limits of the easements so that the township can go out and begin the process for claims. By June, we would submit the final design and permits to DEP. And by October, we'll need to have the claims finished so that the approved easements are in place, that it will be a permitting requirement. We're anticipating that we'll have approvals by January 2025 for a project bid in January, February, and again, it needs to be completed by 2025. So this is the slide that I showed you earlier with those total costs, estimated completion costs. So you can see here, it's pretty self-explanatory. Buying into the duck pond is certainly a cheaper project. It does come with, certainly with some potential future costs, which we really can't predict. But for now, it is, you know, in some cases over half or 50% cheaper than the other projects that we would look at. Again, this is set up so that there are no credits in slab cabin. There would be no additional credits for the next PRP project, whereas option 2, for instance, we'd have 85 linear feet on slab cabin and 271 feet on Beaver Branch. Option 2 would also set you up for, we would do modeling associated with the existing conditions of the Butternut Street culvert, and you know, we would be able to build on that, or we could also get an add-on for, in the proposal for design services to complete design and permitting for that piece of it with the permitting that would be completed for the PRP project. I didn't include that as an option, but there are other combinations here that are available, and you know, that would we would realize some cost savings with a replacement project that is permitted and designed altogether versus as 2 separate projects. So just want to make the board aware of that. There is an opportunity if you'd like to see a proposal from KCI for design and permitting included, if you decide to do A4 alt, that we could look at that. I do have another slide here if you'd like to go to it. This just provides all the updated linear footage costs. I had added this later based on feedback, and I wasn't sure if that'd be interested, but if you have questions, we can refer to this. Otherwise, this is kind of the 3 options that we're kind of looking at now. So with that, any questions, comments, open to anything that you guys have.
Thanks so much, and thanks to KCI and for being here tonight. That was a lot of information, and including new information from Penn State. So, so let's have questions first, and then we can have some discussion. You know, this was anticipated as a, you know, presentation discussion, so I don't know if we'll reach a consensus tonight, but if we don't, we'll plan to bring it back very soon. So we'll just see where we get. So let's start with questions. Sure, go ahead, Matt.
If I may, just a point of clarification. It has to if I understand correctly, everything has to be completed by 2025, but did I hear at the end that bids will only be received in June of 2025?
So permits would be submitted by June of 2024. Bids would be completed in January. I may have said June, I apologize if I did, but it would be January 2025. So then we would have that spring to essentially get the project completed, which is doable.
Okay, so 6 months essentially, or I should say the years, by the calendar year, correct?
No, so, well, in reality, we don't submit our annual report till September of each year. It's technically supposed to be completed by June, by the end of the permit cycle, which is June 25th, 2025. But we will have, there'll be a little leeway. I'm just sticking with the program and the presentation. I'm sure if we get to that point, there are other, slab cabin's a very complex system. It does have, it's a high quality fishery. It has native trout, so there are limitations on when we can work. There are also bat limitations with tree clearing. So all this has to kind of get coordinated. There's a couple of fine hurdles that we're gonna have to get over, which I really didn't bug you guys with tonight. That will get taken care of as we move forward. But I think there are limitations in fall for when we can construct. Consequently, for Park Hills, which is kicking off now, they lifted those limitations because it's not a live stream, it's an ephemeral stream. But with this one, we're going to have to provide, we're going to have to go by all the rules to do the work. So that's a lot of loaded information, but to your point, we'd like to get these done by June 2025. We possibly have a little leeway time till, I'm guessing, September to really close the project out.
Thank you.
Are there questions? We can start over here.
Multiple online participants stating the volume, the sound is muffled.
The sound is muffled online from us, or okay, we can just try to speak into our microphones loud and clear. So we'll see if that helps at all, and yeah, okay. We can start on this end, I guess. Corey, questions, comments?
I mean, if we maybe turn to comments, I definitely have some comments, and I just want to make sure, looking at the pricing and everything here, there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? So when we think about what we're paying for and what we're looking to do here, my question is, are we buying the Ford or are we buying the Bentley? So if we consider maybe the slab cabin Big Hollow, just something, or I'm sorry, the Beaver Branch that has to be done, is that the only option, the only approach for meeting the stormwater that's been proposed here? Is this really let me just ask, the cheapest and maybe just the good solution, or is this maybe a little more expensive, a little better? I want to understand where that kind of sits in the a la carte menu.
So there are different levels of stream restoration.
Right.
A lot of municipalities are getting credits for like habitat structures. Those do have to be maintained. We purposely did not go with things like wood, things that would break down over time. So this is intended to be, as KCI kind of went through the way they design things, this will be, it's a self-sustaining stream. There is a lot of big boulders that will be imported to the stream bed material, similar to what's upstream. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily a Bentley. It's designed to meet a certain criteria so that we don't want to go in there and have to, do maintenance on this continuously. And so it's designed to meet a 100-year storm, which is, and you can debate this all day long. Like I said, some municipalities have gotten credits for just bank stabilization. Some of those probably aren't designed for the 100-year storm, but this is a very steep, especially slab cabins, a very steep area. There's a lot of power, a lot of velocity that you have to deal with, which is why you see when it encroaches, it starts to insize. So it does require bigger materials, which is more costly, and the strategies for minimizing erosion are what you see on the screen. So I don't think could we go with a Gabion system, for instance, on what Penn State did here on their project? We would not be allowed to do that here. DP would have highly frowned on that. So they don't want these what are called hard stabilization measures. They want to make it a natural stream. That's the point of stream restoration. We don't want to present you a project that is going to blow out in one storm. And so this is designed for the 100-year storm for stability. And so it's kind of a hard question. I don't know if you describe streams with Bentleys or Mercedes. What we're doing is restoring it to a place where it will thrive and continue to self-sustain over time.
So I just want to pry that a little bit more and understand that. So bank stabilization is something I've heard about from, other residents that might get flooded out or have erosion issues. So that is something tangible for our citizens, which is great. I think the question then comes in is what happens after that? Why are we really doing this? And to make the argument that, it's a state mandate and it's not funded and everything, there's a lot of consternation with doing anything. So a couple things I want to understand maybe a little bit better. When we think about the boulders, as you stated, large boulders that have to be done, we learned just maybe a month or two ago, that sandstone costs a lot more than limestone, $80,000 in some cases. I think that was the number that we were using. So are we getting the limestone boulders or are we getting sandstone boulders? That's little things like that seem to make a big difference.
Right. No, so this would probably be limestone boulders. We would use as many in situ boulders as we can find. But no, these are actually using very similar pricing to the limestone boulders that we were using for Park Hills. A lot of the similar sizes. So actually it was great to have that as a bid project and see those costs. We think our costs are pretty close because of we did add 10% contingency to our costs because you just don't know. But at the same time, we've been able to use the cost estimates generated from Park Hills bids to better understand what the costs will be here. There's no Cadillacs there. The fringe boulders that we're talking about, those are good for maintenance over time. There's a little bit of cost associated with them. In lieu of that, you could do a fence or some other way of delineating that would require maintenance over time. So, I chose the stone boulders, but we certainly could look at more, alternates for that. There are, those are strategically placed, so we're not lining the whole thing. Our cost estimate does err on the side of conservative with that. So we did use those as part of our cost estimates. So it could get cheaper if you used other alternatives. As far as, the plantings and things like that, those are key components that you really can't change as part of the design. You want to have a certain amount of vegetation. You want it to get established quickly. And then logistics as far as grading, earth moving, and things like that are kind of just part of this that, have to be done as part of the project. So, from that perspective, I think we've really tried to reduce the cost actually and still get this to be stable. We've chosen not to go with the hard armoring with the rock walls that would, basically it would have confined the stream further. We're opening it up. It costs a little bit more money for land, but it's going to be a nicer project. It's going to reduce costs. It's far more natural than what you see with like the Penn State project. I'm sorry, did that answer?
Oh, no, it did. And
Okay.
Aaron, I appreciate that. And again, kind of from my perspective too, as you can tell, I'm looking for cost effective. And I know we'll talk more about this. My other concern too is when I hear DEP request doesn't sound legally binding, right? It's a nice to have. And I'm wondering too, if we're meeting just any requests, if we could maybe take, and something for us to, I guess, deliberate on later, a harder look at saying, okay, a request versus a legal requirement, and therefore maybe changes our approach for something. Just taking that word into consideration too.
Right. So I've worked all around the country. In Pennsylvania, this is the first area that I've seen where there's so much of this with DEP. Most times that I've worked with them, we are collaborative about it. These guys are experts in their field. They know what they're doing. It's not just DEP, it's Fish and Boat who have something to say because of the trout stock waters. And so they are really trying to get this to meet the use that it has. We look at DEP as more of a partner. The things that are requests, like minimizing, stream bed disturbance, that saves us money. I'd prefer to have more structures, quite frankly, because of the erosive velocity. So in that case, they're saving us money. And I think KCI found a good way to do it so that we can ensure that it has long-term stability. So from that perspective, as far as the overall scheme of things, there are ways that things are done these days. Standards have changed over time. We know there's a better way to provide fish passage, for instance. So like the culverts that we would choose, we would choose a culvert with the fish passage ability. We would grade the culvert the way DP would want it to be graded based on, providing that the good fish passage. So those are all pieces that are looked on every permit, any PennDOT permit, all of those things have to be analyzed. So when we say DEP requests, I think it would be better phrased as what's the standard that we need to meet. Okay. And I just will point out that there has been some consternation with DEP internally because a lot of these stream restoration projects do propose similar strategies with steep streams where you have the most erosion. And these are streams, right? They're there to be natural areas. And so DEP has just kind of statewide had issues with some of the approaches that were provided in the PRP. So clean water versus Chapter 105 permitting folks aren't in agreement with everything. That's the nature of the beast, and there's lots of experts out there. So the original design for this in the PRP was to use step pools. The way we got to that point was actually to, we looked at the reference reach upstream. We provided a good analysis which showed, okay, this is what we're actually seeing naturally, and then we mimic that approach. So it's still step pools, cascades, but it is modeled after what is upstream, which is a stable stream. So again, requests, I think maybe not the right word. It's more partnering with them to figure out what's the solution. And again, I don't think any of those, I think any of their input actually in the cases with the restoration would actually reduce the cost for our cases. So I'm not just putting, I don't know if you were here for the work session. I think I showed structures every 10 feet going down just because the velocities are so high. And what we've done is again, we've lowered the water level in the 100-year storm, expanded it out, and so that reduces that shear stress and the power that the stream has to erode. So That's my perspective on it. I mean, it's a case study, so.
Yes.
Thanks. Corey?
Sorry. I think my question is, sorry, it sounds as though after we do one of these projects, we're responsible for maintaining it, right? So if something were to go wrong with it, we would have to pay the cost of restoring whatever thing we did. And in the future, we have to keep adding more projects in theory, because we're going to be asked to reduce our loads, and we're going to have to grow that infrastructure over time. I mean, I will comment. I think it's prudent for us to invest in these interventions so that we don't have to face the potential costs in the future, knowing that how we've already watched construction costs on these projects go up and up. I can't really imagine, right, having to come back in 5 years or 10 years and have
I'm
to.
sorry, are other people online having trouble hearing?
She can't hear us.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time hearing as well.
Okay.
Thanks. Let us just take a second here and try to check the. Patty, can you hear me all right when I'm speaking?
You're very muffled, Lisa.
Oh, okay.
I've gotten an email that says that they.
This is Rhonda. I logged off and came back on, and now I can hear.
Okay, thank you, Rhonda.
Okay, I'll give it a try. Thanks.
Okay. Patty, we'll just recess here for 2 minutes while Patty logs off and logs back on.
You're watching CNET, Center County's Government and Educational Access Network.
Since Patty's back on, we're going to move forward and call ourselves back to order.
I'll repeat
Thank you.
my comments for the record. So again, my question was for all of these MS4 projects that we're doing, the township, it's my understanding that we are required to maintain them in perpetuity. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay. And so it's my comment that I think we should make the investment in these projects if we're going to do them, so that one, there's less cost to maintain whatever it is we're going to do, and that we hopefully reduce the risk of having to spend a lot of money in any one year having to repair a bunch of projects after a major storm. So I think it is prudent to spend the funds now on these particular projects, given the way that you've explained them to us, and that they will be low maintenance and that they are designed to last longer than potentially other options we could deploy. I think that just seems prudent to me.
Thank you. Jeremy?
I would echo Corey's comments. I do believe that these projects will serve a needed purpose over time, especially at maintaining neighboring property and being able to manage stormwater flows. I'm very concerned, though, with what we're seeing where, for instance, like the Park Hills Drainage Way project started at an initial number, and then over time, inflation reared its ugly head. And it's just, how do we maintain that sustainability fiscally, but also doing a project that's going to last and not require additional ramification down the line that would be costly, if not more costly than initially not doing anything at all.
Thanks. Patty, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I think what Corey and Jeremy said, I reflect my feelings.
Thanks. I mean, they're all, projects that'll contribute something, they're all important. So you can't say that, none of them are worthwhile, but I am looking at not only the cost now, but the fact that we're going to have to do another permitting cycle in 5 years, or in 2025. And so
there are, I just don't want to lead you down the wrong path. There are other options out there for obtaining our goals. Part of what we've really worked on is trying to account for things like our street sweeping program, and making sure that we are, you can remove a ton of debris every year. You have to be, steadfast and make sure you get it done. But there are other methodologies out there. And I will point out again, we have not received any updates on the PRP, unfortunately, yet from DEP. It would be very nice if they would provide that to us. We have asked. I can try to reach out to central office. That seems to be where things happen. But I've talked to College Township. They, and if Jerry from College doesn't have any information, generally speaking, there's nothing available. So I would, I would bet my money on what he's told me. So we don't know what's going to happen with the next PRP cycle. And it's very possible, I shouldn't probably say this because I don't know, but it could get extended for a couple years. We just don't know. So just be aware of the possibilities. I know it doesn't help with decision making, but I don't want to lead you down the wrong path where DEP all of a sudden comes back and says, oh, you have another 2 years to get this done, or we're going to lay off stream restoration for the next permit cycle and focus more on, maintaining what you have, or, I've heard all of these things kicked around. So that's helpful. Thank you. I just don't think you should put all your eggs in one basket.
That's really helpful too. And just, going back to your earlier point that, is this true? Is this correct that we don't know about banking the credits at this point?
We've been given no word. So generally speaking, and I'll just say Pennsylvania follows Maryland. Maryland does bank stream restoration credits. It doesn't make sense not to. I think you'd have a lot of municipalities up in arms if they said, they did extra work and now they're not going to get credit. Right. So I personally, I guess I don't see that not happening, but you never know. So yes, they have not provided guidance on it yet.
That is all really helpful information, and I know I really appreciate all the work that's gone in since that January presentation, because that was a lot of information and we gave a lot of feedback at that time, and so you clearly took all that and really worked on trying to get these projects to a place where it was kind of manageable. I am really happy about the proposal for the duck pond. I think it's, I think that if we did that, it is obviously a cost-effective tool to get the credits that we need, and we're still doing a project in the township, a large restoration project in the township. And again, we'll be doing another project, whatever it is, or looking at whatever they're going to be emphasizing or new things that they're going to count in the next permitting cycle. So it's not that it's our only chance to do these things, and we can still look at these projects in the future if we determine what those needs are, but we could do them on our own time. And so this is really about meeting these requirements and how best to do that. So I personally am in favor of doing the duck pond and the beaver branch restoration. I know we've had issues in that area before, and so I was pleased to hear that was a possibility, and still doing a project here in the township that we know is important. So again, all of those things, and knowing we'll still have to do some other things in the future. That's where I'm at. And again, I don't want to push anybody into making, a decision tonight, because we didn't have that in the agenda. So what we could plan to bring this back, and I'll look to the manager for timing on that. And I guess, Dave and Aaron too.
First available.
We could bring this back for the December 12th meeting if the board would like to have a final discussion for a decision, or if not, then I would strongly recommend the meeting in January, the first meeting in January, just so we can proceed and move forward and execute the decision. I know Penn State's reached out to me several times for confirmation, so they can plan accordingly.
Concert on January 12th with the kids. December 12th, I'm sorry. Yeah. Thank you, Dave. I mean, I could probably, I have to see, I don't know what time it is, but just.
Yeah, I can be available.
Okay, yeah.
For the decision, yeah. I would agree. If Dave can be available,
yeah, I think
that would be suffice.
So if that's fine, if Dave, if you can be here, we don't want to cause you to miss anything unplanned, so that's not fair either. So, but I think you gave us a lot of information tonight. We have it all here, and if you could also share the updated slides with us.
I will share the narrative too, so you can just essentially read what I presented, because
that's
what I
great.
have to do to present.
That's great.
A lot of information in there.
And then if everybody's comfortable with the 12th, continuing this discussion then, so I think that's okay. Okay. And if you guys are okay with that. And so we could do this, there is a motion in the agenda for accepting the presentation. If someone wants to make that.
Yeah, I think there was public.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and do public comment first, and then we'll take that. Whoever would like to, please. We'll take public comment first before we take a motion. So if you want to come up to the podium and give us your name and township of residence.
Bill Keogh, Ferguson Township. I guess part of my question is, what can we afford as a township? And coupled with that, you guys are always faced with sometimes having to make decisions in somewhat of a vacuum. You don't know what it's going to cost. We don't have good data with regard to this, but I guess my concern is, how does your choice about this issue impact on the stormwater fee amount charged to our residents? I'm concerned that the stormwater fee, I mean, we pride ourselves in not raising taxes in this township. But the stormwater fee is a separate item. And it's very difficult for me to figure out, based on the conversation tonight, what impact the costs of whatever your choice is going to have on the amount that the fee for stormwater is set at for either this coming year or the year after that. Because somehow we're going to have to pay for whatever we choose to do. So I think you need to be mindful of that impact, because that impact is directly passed on to the residents of the township. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Yep, go. Come on up to the podium and go ahead and give us your name and township of residence.
Okay, my name is...
if you could, first CNET, thank you.
My name is Dan Harner, and I have a very basic question, and that is the definition of a 100-year storm. I've heard that, the current definition, I've heard that number, or that name, that word, that phrase, kicked around for probably 40 years, and I've never really gotten a really accurate definition of what that means and how it's interpreted and how it impacts different areas. So.
Thank you.
This is fun tonight. Oh, this is fun tonight. So, so the definition of a 100-year storm, and you're right, you do hear it kicked around, and there's a lot of misunderstanding. So, good points. But it's statistical probability of that rainfall event that would generate the runoff occurring once in 100 years. And if you look at the statistics, so you can have a 5-minute 100-year event, you could have a 2-year, a 2-hour 100-year event, you could have a 24-hour 100-year event. All of those are associated with different statistical values. And again, there's a 1 in 100-year chance of that that rainfall event occurring. So again, that's why you see more 100-year events. You also We see additional rainfall falling. We see more extreme weather. Typically speaking, Ferguson Township is impacted most by the shorter, more intense events because we have smaller watersheds. versus like the Susquehanna, which would be more highly impacted by like a 24-hour 100-year event. So if we have a big rainstorm here, it doesn't necessarily cause adverse impacts to like the Susquehanna. Does that provide a good explanation answering your question?
No, not at all. So
Okay.
who determines when we have a 100-year storm?
So again, if you go to NOAA's website, I'll be happy to give you, I can send this information to you. They have precipitation frequency charts. And so on those, they have increments of 5, 10, 15 minutes, all the way up to 24 hours and beyond. And going across, they have a statistical frequency of, the 1-year storm, the 2-year storm, 5-year storm, so on and so forth, all the way out to the 1,000-year storm. And so when you get a rainfall event that occurs within a certain time period on that chart, let's say we get 2 inches in an hour, you'd go to the 2-inch mark, it occurred in 2 hours, and you could see where that lined up on, the statistical frequency. It might be the 50-year event, it might be the 100-year event.
And if you have additional questions, because we can't see you on CNET, so
Well, this will be my last question.
if you want to come on up to the podium so that they can see you, and thank you.
Does the 100-year storm definition then not depend on the topography of the land?
So the 100-year storm does not. So that's the hydrology portion of it. The hydraulics portion and the calculating of the flow events is based on topography, soils, the steepness of the terrain, the type of terrain you have. So really, the 100-year rainfall event.
And then if we have, sorry to cut you off, Aaron, if we have additional questions about this particular item, go ahead and ask me, and I don't want to have to get into a back and forth with staff. And so if there were additional questions just on the 100-year storm, is that the question, or?
Yeah, well, no, I have no more questions. I think that it's kind of very confusing when we hear terms kicked around like 100-year storms to the general public. And I would assume that the topography has an awful lot to do with the definition of the 100-year storm. But evidently it doesn't. Evidently that's something else. So I think to reference this all the time, and I think it's not just here, it's everywhere, and a lot of terms like this get kicked around. I think it kind of does a disservice because it confuses everybody as to what's actually going on.
Okay, thank you. Yep. Thank you for that. Anything else you wanted to say on that?
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate all the information and the question. Thanks very much. And was there any other public comment? I'm not seeing any. So if there was no more, we'll go ahead and take a motion to accept the presentation this evening.
So moved. This is Corey.
Is there a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Thompson.
Okay, any other discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed, say no. All right, thanks very much. Thanks for the public input. Thanks, Aaron, very much for that presentation, and Dave for all that information. And we'll look forward to continuing that.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for joining us tonight. It's appreciated.